This week, Ron Reiter, co-founder and CTO of Sentra, is with us to discuss being an investor and entrepreneur in data security. Then Ryan Pullen, head of cybersecurity at Stripe OLT, joins us to talk about building the right business culture to manage human error. Finally, in the enterprise security news, funding announcements take a bit of a break. We explore a few new vendors and organizations that have come to our attention recently. Wiz researchers annoy yet another cloud service by pointing out ridiculous vulnerabilities. IBM Cloud is the one this time. Docker Hub has tons of shady stuffs going on. EU strengthens cybersecurity with new legislation. The U.S. Department of Defense releases zero trust strategy. Microsoft 365 outlawed in the EU. Ransomware makes up the majority of all UK government crisis management meetings. And AI can now tell kids bedtime stories, but do we really want them to? All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
Don't leave the door open. Secure your APIs with the Curity Identity Server. Curity allows you to centralize identity management policies with a solution developed by an expert team using well-established standards. Curity facilitates scalable security for apps and websites by offering a unique combination of identity and access management with API security. Protect your users, secure apps and websites, manage API access. Start your free trial today at securityweekly.com/Curity. The shift to remote and hybrid work over the past 2 years has accelerated application development on cloud infrastructure. However, securing these new assets has lagged behind. Qualys CloudView, the next generation of cloud security posture management, delivers an end-to-end multi-cloud security and compliance solution encompassing the entire application lifecycle from build to runtime. CloudView enables enterprises to assess their cloud security and compliance posture, identify risks and gaps, auto-remediate issues, proactively enforce best practices, and prove compliance in audits rapidly and efficiently. Identify your most vulnerable cloud assets by visiting securityweekly.com/Qualys. We know that many of you are looking to bolster your security posture with cloud-native app protection and XDR. So if you haven't heard of Uptycs, put them on your radar. They offer both cloud and endpoint security in a single solution. Listeners can use Uptycs for up to 1,000 assets for a full year for only $1. But hurry, this offer available only through December 31st at securityweekly.com/Uptycs. That's securityweekly.com/UPTYCS. All right. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy Antarctica Day. This is episode 298, recorded on Thursday, December 1st, 2022. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the master of marketing, the mayor of mayhem, the arch nemesis of chocolate, Tyler Shields. How are you, Chocolate?
I am all right. Thank gosh. I have not run into any chocolate lately. There's been no chocolate murders.
Good to hear. We also have the czar of zero trust, the captain of content, the supply chain whisperer, Katie Teitler. How are you, Katie?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm getting over probably the worst flu I've ever had.
Oh,
yeah. I had a fever for 7 days. It was madness.
Did that coincide with Turkey Day?
Oh yeah. I get hit with a fever. It was Wednesday afternoon that I realized something was wrong. So yeah, had to cancel 3 different Thanksgiving things. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a bummer.
And I was supposed to cook for all 3 of them. So yeah, that was fun. My kids jumped in and got some of the cooking done for me, so it wasn't a complete loss. I still sent food. But finally, also joining us is Sean Metcalf, for whom I do not have a fancy intro yet, but I will eventually, Sean. How are you?
Doing good, thanks. We'll collaborate on something that's just as catchy as the others, and hopefully it'll measure up. Doing good. Post Thanksgiving, recovering, getting back into the swing of things. Great to be back. Thanks.
Yes, Tyler. My beard is going AWOL. That's one of the things. When I was sick, I didn't have a chance to take care of it, and my whole facial hair situation is asymmetric entirely. Like
Adrian,
I like a crop circle over here and a bald spot over here. Yeah.
I asked that in a private back channel just so that it wouldn't call it out publicly, and then you go and like drop the bomb like, nope, it's AWOL. This shit's going crazy.
It's fine. It's fine. It's been a week.
It has, clearly, my friend.
No, I look at that and I try and pat it down. I can't let it get longer than a certain length, or it just starts doing weird stuff. Yeah.
Red Bull gives you wings, Adrian. Red Bull gives you wings.
So Antarctica Day, before we launch into this interview, went down a rabbit hole with this one. That was kind of fun. Not sure how you want to celebrate. Maybe watch a documentary on Antarctica, or maybe Happy Feet or something like that. But the reason today is Antarctica Day is the original Antarctic Treaty was signed on December 1st. And the treaty basically sets some basic rules, like no fighting on Antarctica, no putting nuclear waste there, no disposing of your trash, and everyone has to get along and share. So basically, it's like the world's most dangerous, coldest kindergarten environment.
Wow.
So thought that was interesting. Also, fun fact. It wasn't discovered until 1820, which means we knew the entire solar system, Pluto excluded, before we knew all the continents.
Oh, so that is wild.
That hadn't occurred to me.
That's a true interesting piece of bar trivia that could be used right there. I like that one.
Yeah, me too. We knew the extent of for the most part, the extent of the solar system before the extent of our own planet in terms of landmass. And 90% of the planet's ice is on Antarctica, and that's where all the evidence of aliens is, according to The Thing and X-Files, and maybe some other movies. All right, quick announcement before we jump into our first interview here. Security Weekly listeners, we need to hear your voices. Leave us your feedback on Apple Podcasts and submit a screenshot to our giveaway form for a chance to win a $100 gift card from Hacker Warehouse. This giveaway will be open until the end of the year. We appreciate your honest feedback so we can continue to make great content for our audience. Visit securityweekly.com/giveaway to enter. All right, and looking forward to reading those reviews as well. Also, welcome to everybody watching on YouTube. All of a sudden, our views on YouTube went from a couple hundred per episode to a couple thousand per episode. So
that's awesome.
It's pretty awesome to see. Big jump like that.
Well, what we need to do, Adrian, though, is if you're on YouTube, you got to smash the like, smash the subscribe, smash the notify buttons, all those notify things.
Yeah, the bell. It's a bell.
The bell. That's right.
Hit the bell. Yeah, subscribe, and we'll let you know when this goes live, because we do record live. If you're watching us on YouTube at some point and you don't realize that we stream live to both Twitch and YouTube, we do that 3 p.m. Eastern every Thursday. All right, and for our first interview today, the gentleman we have with us is an investor and an entrepreneur, so that's one of our main topics for today. And he's also founder of a DSPM startup, which is an area, a new category in cybersecurity that we've been discussing quite a bit. That investor and entrepreneur is Ron Reiter, co-founder and CTO of Sentra. After selling his first company, Crosswise, to Oracle in 2016, Ron made a dozen investments in other cybersecurity startups, and eventually he left Oracle to start his current company, Sentra. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Absolutely. It's good conversation that looking forward to. I think things are they feel a little bit more stable than they were. I think in the around the summertime, when the stocks were dropping and everything, and everybody didn't really know where this was going. Not that we entirely do at this point either. I think a lot of those valuation drops are still pretty solid. And then with everything going on in the crypto space, that doesn't really have a direct impact on us here, but certainly feels like, I think contributes to the general unease, that I think might exist around investments and raising money and things like that in general. I think people are maybe clutching things a little bit closer to their chest right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, the crypto space especially is very, very hyped up, mostly because it's very speculative. Not a lot of people know how things will end up there in terms of use cases. And I think that's why we're seeing the most, the drop there, and, all the companies, BlockFi, Celsius, crashing. It's just because people are scared and pulling their money out. But I think for cybersecurity and other fintech and other places that other startup categories that have a good round of use cases and in general things that are that seem to be of use to the world. I think now there's a kind of some sort of incline, a very slight incline in optimism around these spaces.
And we're now getting requests for investment advice from Twitch viewers.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to provide any any investment advice here, but certainly I think if crypto didn't feel volatile to you before, like a risky investment, I don't know what I can say to convince you, but it definitely is.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very pessimistic on that field. If you want my crypto advice, it's stick to the things that people want, like Bitcoin, Ethereum. Everything else there is basically speculations on other use cases. Even the cybersecurity startups assume that there are going to be use cases on the blockchain, which is why cybersecurity for crypto is also in question right now in terms of how usable it is and how important it is to the world. So it's interesting, and I have a lot of Bitcoin myself, by the way, and I really appreciate the technology. But I think Bitcoin is one thing, and Web3 is a completely different thing.
So,
yeah.
So Ron, you and I have similar backgrounds. We both come from the technology world. We've both been in cyber most, if not all, of our career. We've had a couple of successful exits, and we've become cybersecurity-focused angel investors. One of the things I love to talk about with technologists such as yourself is kind of that crystal ball futures, of course, but also investment theses. What gets you excited today? Now, clearly, your current company, Sentra, is doing data-centric cloud security, right? So obviously you have a investment thesis around that, where you're investing your personal time. But setting that one aside, what areas of focus in cyber today make you go, hey, I'm super excited about that? That seems like a great growth area.
That's a great question. I think naturally everything about the cloud is obvious, right? I think data security is only one thing that's going to change in the cloud, but everything from CSPMs, identity management, API security, everything is basically going to change and have its own version of how you do things in the cloud. I think data security is just one of them, but you can say that for, posture management, for identity management, everything, or even for backups, right? Do you want to know if your whole organization is backed up? So not only for cybersecurity, but also for just about any IT related use case, I think there's going to be a new version of a startup for the cloud, which will kind of beat the old world completely. And it's interesting to see, because it really could potentially destroy a lot of companies and create a lot of new huge companies. I think Wiz is a good example of a company that could easily make the older companies in the cybersecurity categories kind of less relevant. But that's just in security. I think in every category you can see that in the cloud. I think that's one thing, and since I'm really into IT DevOps security, I mean that's really where my focus is. But I think in terms of blockchain and crypto, I think I mentioned it. I don't think it's a really interesting place to be at right now, because mostly the use cases there aren't proven. But definitely, I think the 2020s is definitely a year where the banks and fintech are going to go through a very big revolution. You can see it with startups like Melio or Unit or just Brex, like just a bunch of them. Rapid, they're all like just changing the whole fintech ecosystem, because everything is becoming more open and more API based and API driven. So I think that's an obvious one. So I think basically, I would say the cloud and fintech are the two things that I'm most excited about. I think are the biggest changes in this decade.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like specifically for me, I have an investment thesis around cybersecurity, every sub-segment of cybersecurity being reinvented based off of the transition to cloud. And it's funny because you would have thought that cyber would have reinvented by now with much of this transition to cloud starting years ago, but it's just been such a slow boil for cloud transition that cyber has just now started to really catch up, maybe in the last 2 years. I also love a few other ideas around like application security, API security being reinvented due to cloud and how we build applications. Talk to me a little bit about the founding, and I hope I'm not stealing all of Adrian's thunder, but talk to me a little bit about the founding of Sentra. I always find it very interesting to discuss the moment of clarity when a founder goes, yep, that's the one that we want to do. That's what we want to build. Can you tell us a little bit about that moment?
Sure. So I think, most of my life, I kind of collected tools to understand the problems that are arising in the world around cybersecurity and data. And I think, I've been a cybersecurity practitioner in the Army. I've been a data engineer at Crosswise. So I have a kind of a good grasp of where the world is going in terms of the cloud. And a funny story. So basically what happened to me in 2019, I was in Oracle, right? And I was a manager there. And suddenly I got this notice that there was a server that was found open to the internet that was potentially exposing PII. I'll stop there because I don't want to get in trouble. But long story short, that was a big deal, and I did notice something about that world, and I kind of understood that there's not much technology nowadays that would be potentially able to even notice that thing, right? Because it's not trivial to understand what is a data vulnerability. Having a server open to the internet with bad security posture means nothing about the risk to the organization. So without understanding the sensitivity of the data around it, it's just a lot of noise. So once you reduce data and exposure of data with vulnerable infrastructure or issues around data, then you get a very, very small subset, and that's really where the focus should be. And of course, the thesis around CSPMs goes right into the DSPM world, right? The reason that the CSPMs are huge is because posture of security changes in the cloud much more than it used to. And in data, it's even worse because there's every day there's more data being collected, more people are accessing the data inside the organization. And data is being duplicated, more tools, more third-party tools need to process the data, so you send it in and out. You have SaaS services, you have PaaS services. So the data of your organization is basically jumping everywhere, and there's nothing that can actually tell you where your data is. So I think it's an order of magnitude of a bigger issue than cloud security posture. But it's kind of the same, the problem is the cloud, right? The cloud is just kind of, it's basically putting the organization in a state where they need to put the data everywhere. And if they don't do it, then they kind of hurt the potential of the company, right? So everyone does it because they're not going to wait for security to catch up, right? So that's really what my thesis was, and I kind of understood that, since in 2010 it was software is eating the world, now in 2020 it's data is eating the world. Data is the most valuable asset today. Data is king, and data is going to be more and more significant. And we will see that by large companies having a very large market share based on the data that they have. So obviously the need for protecting that data wherever it is, it's going to grow exponentially. Put that with cloud growth, which is just beginning, right? The cloud is like the big companies are still not in the cloud. You multiply that by the problem that they're going to see. They're not even seeing it. It's like basically seeing a train hurtling, 200 miles an hour into a wall, and no one's seeing it. And I'm very convinced that this is a huge problem, and we're seeing a lot of more, compliance and regulation around data breaches, and the understanding that data leaks is happening on a daily basis, and the price of data leaks is going up. So we're seeing this thing, and nothing seems to stop it. So, and I think it all begins and all starts with knowing where your data is, and then you can protect it. And there was no tool anywhere that could automatically tell you where your sensitive data is. That was 2021, and nowadays I think DSPM is already becoming a category. I think we thought we invented the term DSPM about June 2021. Nowadays, Gartner knows what DSPM is. Every cybersecurity vendor knows what it is. Every large security vendor is basically looking to build or acquire a company in that space. I think it's the quickest creation of a category that I've seen in cybersecurity. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing for me, but it's definitely very stressful.
Ron, I think your characterization that you said is accurate. I mean, we're seeing the same thing. For years, companies have been keeping their data in warehouses of some sort, whether that's a SQL database or other on-prem. And now that they have the opportunity to leverage the cloud, be it Azure, AWS, GCP, or many other SaaS services, that data just kind of sprawls everywhere. Sometimes it's categorized, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's encrypted, sometimes it's not. So I've definitely seen with the cloud, we have this issue it's effectively two-pronged. One is the identity side of it, which is what I tend to focus on. The other side is data, which you're definitely talking about and focused on with Sentra. How do you see a solution to this moving forward with the data kind of spread everywhere across multiple cloud vendors in different data storage types, be it a relational graph database or NoSQL database or SQL or somewhere else, and then how best to handle that different types of data, whether it's categorized, tagged, or other?
Great question. So I think the age of DLP, or the concept of having a DLP, I think is kind of over. People realize that you can contain data in the way that you're actually putting a lid on it and looking at everything that's going in and out and saying, this is okay, this is not okay. In the age of the cloud, it's just too expensive to do it, and it's impossible to do it. So I think nowadays the reality kind of forces us to do something else, which is to map out all the data in a way that's not, you're not putting yourself in line with all the different types of, you're not putting proxies everywhere and making sure that data is being controlled. That's never going to work. So the approach needs to be knowing where all your data is, even if it's on IaaS, it's on PaaS, it's on SaaS, everywhere, and being able to control it in some ways, right? So these controls are basically what the organization can use to kind of draw a virtual perimeter around the data. As long as it knows about the data and it knows who has access to the data and it knows if data has been duplicated, then the organization can have a pretty good idea of what's going on with the data. So yeah, it might mean that there might be a data leak, but it's only because it was overprivileged to begin with, but now you know it, right? You allowed it to be in a position where it could be duplicated, or you haven't fixed the security issue that is on the storing the data. So I think that's really where you have to start, and I think organizations that have a good idea of where their data is, which is in the billions or in the petabytes, billions of files in the petabytes. So I think they should be in a good position. Of course, they need a tool that will help them do that, and that's why Sentra exists, obviously, because that tool is not only about discovering the data and doing classification and the understanding of how much data is at risk. It's also about helping them remediate the issues, and that's a whole different world in data. How do you do data remediation? That's a topic on its own.
Now, I couldn't agree with you more about DLP kind of being the older school approach, and now we need to approach this issue with new solutions, because it is very different now with data being stored in on-prem as well as cloud environments. You've talked before about a data attack surface. Can you go into a little bit about that and how Sentra is working towards helping solve that?
Of course. So data attack surface is basically a measure of how secure your organization is, so that when there is some sort of data breach, what are the odds that there will be a major data leak that will cause some business malfunction or any damage to your business. So you can look at it as basically what are the chances of either an insider threat or someone from the outside to gain access to sensitive data. So the more data that you have that isn't being used right now, puts your data at risk. So that's what we call shadow data, right? So data that you haven't really known that you're not using anymore. Someone may have forgotten it somewhere. It's sort of abandoned. It puts your organization at risk because no one knows about it anymore. So the fact that no one knows about it means that there's a bigger chance of people forgetting it, which puts your organization more at risk. I think that's just one example. But of course, any risk factor on data increases your data attack surface. So the more the security posture of the infrastructure that holds the data is weak, or the more copies you have of sensitive data, or the data could be, of course, overprivileged, just like infrastructure could be overprivileged. So if it's overprivileged, then it means that there's the data attack surface is bigger. So if you put all these things together, you can even construct some sort of score that could even tell you what is the probability of you having a data leak if someone actually manages to breach the organization. And I think another thing that our experience kind of tells us is that every organization is going to get breached, right? There's no way you might know about it, you might not know about it, but you need to work under the assumption that your organization will get breached, which is always why you would want to always minimize the data attack surface as much as you can.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that. With what you said about the sensitivity of things and where data is, certainly a lot of this ends up being something that can be related to industry. So obviously, healthcare in the U.S. versus healthcare in other countries, financial systems, again, depending on where it is. Do you have ideas around, or does your solution have ideas around how to better protect those specific industry types of data? I mean, DLP was supposed to give us an idea of what certain types of numbers look like a credit card number, but that's very specific and a sort of identified to a specific use case versus something that needs to be more flexible, given the cloud world that we're in and the different types of data that we have.
Yeah, so I think I'll divide my answer into two. So I think first of all, there is the question of tagging your data, right? Understanding where and what type of data it is, and then how sensitive it is to your organization. And then there's the world of compliance and governance, privacy, all these different aspects of how basically the outside is telling you to store your data. So I think Sentra, one of the things that we try to do as automatic as possible is to help the organization with telling them what types of data you have. We'll obviously find it automatically, but basically to help the organization understand their data. Once you have a good understanding of your data, then there's a lot of different risk factors that you would need to minimize. So some of them would be compliance based. So for example, Sentra has understanding of what type of data you have in terms of should it be in EU region or in the US region? Are these emails supposed to be they're probably German citizens, they're probably not supposed to be in outside of Germany, right? So that's called data locality. So these types of frameworks are things that every organization needs to understand, and basically the regulations have to be accepted, and tools such as Sentra can actually make these things much easier for the organization to comply with. And I think the world is also going towards a place where more and more of these regulations are going to affect and make the organization's life much harder, and without a tool that will automatically help them comply with all these different types of new data regulations, then it's going to be very hard to hold data. It's just becoming increasingly hard to hold sensitive data, and increasingly complex and expensive because of these things. And I think that's a very big unknown for how the world is going to develop. I think we can see it in healthcare data. Healthcare is very hard in terms of regulation, but I think the rest of the categories, financial data, even not only PII, but also even how you store your sensitive your source code, right? That could even be an issue. And I think overall, what I'm basically trying to say is that understanding your data and complying with all the different types of regulations that in the future is going to be a very huge problem that organization will definitely need a lot of help with from the outside.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to characterize the issues that we're seeing, and certainly, as we said, kind of how this thing sprawls. What's the key value proposition that Sentra brings to the table around helping control and get a better feel for this data, as well as protecting it, such as through encryption or something else?
So basically, what we do, the basics of Sentra is automatic discovery and classification of data wherever it is. So we scan things like managed data stores, unmanaged data stores, and API-based data stores such as S3. We also do some structuring of the data, so we would understand, for example, in unstructured databases such as S3, we would understand the structure, and we would even be able to understand kind of the distinct data assets and kind of the data flows that create those data assets. Once we have a good idea of the type of data that you have wherever it is, then we do the classification automatically. And on top of that, we do a risk assessment. So risk assessment is based on three things: security posture, which is whether or not the data is encrypted, understanding of whether or not it's backed up, is there retention rules, is it publicly accessible, or even we can use external information from other CSPMs or such to understand the infrastructure. We also try to understand if data is being moved around the organization. So, for example, we would know that a specific piece of data would be replicated across 2 different data stores, 2 different regions, 2 different anything, basically, virtually any place that you can replicate the data, we would probably find it. And the last, and I think the most interesting part is, so we have a data authorization graph that basically tells you for every piece of data in your organization, who has access to it. And being able to understand that picture gives you a lot of understanding of how people inside and outside of your organization have access to sensitive data. For example, if you would, have a Datadog user that can go into your cloud environment, and you would want to know what happens if Datadog was to be breached, then what type of sensitive information would it have access to it? And that's one of the things that we can also provide. So, and basically all of these things which incorporate the risk of the data or the data attack surface, we have an automatic policy engine that can create alerts based on policy violations that we can basically the system can trigger automatically. And these things, basically, we have a lot of out-of-the-box policies that give you, for example, what I said before, compliance or security-related policies that would just, if you would just install Sentra, it would automatically kind of be covered in that sense.
So I'm going to take a quick gear shift and get back to a little bit less of the data discussion and a little bit more of the angel investing discussion, because I think you have a very, very cool and very unique, impressive background and impressive track record when it comes to seed investing. For those that don't know, Ron on his LinkedIn has seed investments listed, including major companies such as Axonius, Talon, Cyber, Rookout, all sorts of really cool companies. How did you get into the angel investing side of what you do, Ron? And tell me a little bit about where your deal flow comes from and what some of your investing philosophies might be there.
So I think I was very lucky because first of all, Israel is very small, so it's very like everyone here knows each other. So in terms of opportunities, you kind of have a lot to invest in. But I think why I've been lucky is because since I've been a second timer and sold a company, a lot of people want my advice, and I've kind of built my reputation around being this second timer, building a company that can help others build and sell their companies, or build it to an IPO. And I've been advising a lot of startups, and then I've noticed that it kind of gives me the deal flow to do investments, and you have the money, right, to invest, because you sell the company, and then you have a lot of very, very talented people coming and asking you for advice. And if there's one thing I'm good at, is identifying when people are smarter than me. So I've just decided to take basically use my access to very interesting startups and just invest in people who I really think are exceptional entrepreneurs that would wish that others would invest in, that would everyone would want to go into deals such as Guardio or Talon, or these are very, very attractive startups that have a very, very significant potential upside, right? Because that's how it works with second timers, third timers, and I think basically all these companies, such as myself, we kind of look for building out a very large angel pool of people that can help. Basically, not only with their being just an angel investor and using their name, but also with advice. So a lot of people come to me and want me to invest so that I can also help out in the startup in some sort of way. But I think really it's an honor for me, because a lot of these startups want me on their cap table, and for me it's the best and the easiest type of investment, because I get to be in a place where it's almost obvious that going to have a good outcome, because a lot of people want to invest in some companies. So
yeah, it's really interesting. I come from a similar background as you, so I've had very similar results and stories. It's funny. I read an article this morning, and I write a weekly newsletter called the Cyber Why. And inside the Cyber Why, I wrote a paragraph today equating early stage seed and angel investing to similar to like the poker game, where there's a combination of luck with skill. If you had to sit down and say angel investing and seed investing, early, super early stage investing, would you say it's more luck or more skill, or kind of somewhere in the middle that's gotten you the success that you've gotten?
Well, I think 5 or 6 years ago, I would say maybe luck. But I think nowadays, if you have good access, maybe I'll add a third one, access, right? I think the most significant IRR predictor is access, because the best of the companies would always want to, raise money from andreessen horowitz, right? So obviously they don't need to work hard to identify these, because the best of the entrepreneurs will come, directly to them. So I mean, taking that out, I think, over time you do kind of, I mean, it would become obviously easier to invest in things in areas that you do understand, which is why I kind of now invest more and more in cyber, because it's much easier for me to know what would work and what wouldn't work. And it's the question is very simple. Invest in very good entrepreneurs that have the right approach for how to find a problem in cybersecurity. And there are some areas that I invest in and some areas that I don't invest in. For example, cyber for crypto is something that is, hard for me to invest in. So I do have my thesis. So hope I was clear.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I want to follow up with one other question before I pass it off to some of the other co-hosts here. What in particular do you look for? So it's globally stated by pretty much every early stage investor that we invest in people, right? We invest in the people. Obviously, there has to be good technology, or at least a good idea, but it's so early stage, it's very difficult to say whether the idea is even going to come to fruition in the right way, whether they're going to get product market fit. So most super early stage investors say, hey, we invest in the people. What do you look for in the people you invest in, or in that super early seed stage?
So obviously, that they would be smarter than me. That's the most important thing. But I think for a CEO, I would say, someone who's very who sees the world as it is, very on the ground, and someone who really understands how the world looks like. Someone that if I would have a conversation with him on what I think about other companies and how the world is going to look like in 5 years from now, then we kind of see the same things, right? And from a technical co-founder, that's much easier for me to assess. I think, first of all, it's very easy for me to see that someone really is a strong technical founder. But I think technical founders also have to be very good people leaders. And a lot of times I've been seeing companies that don't have that trait for technical founders. So if you're a person that people kind of want to work for, if you're a person that is kind of the first thing that comes out of an interaction with you is I want to work for you, or you seem like an amazing leader, or someone who would be standing in front of a crowd of 100 people and speaking to them and telling them about how the company is doing. If that makes sense, then I would definitely invest. It's kind of an aura around the people that it's kind of easy to spot those leaders, and I think that's the most important. People who are they're appreciated, their opinions are appreciated, and that's basically, I think, the most important trait that I always look for.
That's awesome insights, Ron. Thank you for all that. All right, and we've got to go ahead and wrap here. But Ron, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today and sharing all the insights on both the DSPM side of things and the investment side of things. This was really great.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
All right, and stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk building the right business culture to manage human error with Ryan Pullen from Stripe OLT.
The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra. Customers want fast and frictionless digital experiences, yet also expect protection against breaches, privacy violations, and fraud. Drive engagement by optimizing security and convenience to attract and retain customers. Use the PingOne cloud platform to build, test, and optimize digital experiences. The no-code orchestration engine weaves together authentication, user management, and MFA, all of which can enhance security, drive engagement, and boost revenues. Visit securityweekly.com/ping identity to learn more.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your questions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and will reach out to you once reviewed. All right, for our next interview, today, Ryan Pullen joins us to talk about building the right business culture to manage human error. Ryan is head of cybersecurity at Stripe OLT, is experienced in pen testing, incident response, and OSINT, and is a recent TEDx speaker. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you very much for having me.
How was that TEDx process? It seems like, I mean, even the TEDx ones, like I just imagine it's a very long and stressful process to prep for that.
It's really interesting because I did it in my hometown, and so it wasn't any traveling or anything like that, which I had to account for, which was really good. But there was certainly a lot of revisions because for the first time I wasn't talking to an audience who was interested in the topic. It had to be more generalized. And so I find myself more specifically looking at generalistic examples, which, you know, the type of SMS campaigns that come out this time of year, protecting people, keeping people safe. But I talked about different narratives. And so it gave the audience a bit more of an understanding of how everyone can be impacted by cybercrime. And so, for example, one scenario I was the responder, understanding the impact potentially on some employees and some businesses. And then in a very much a different perspective, I was the target. And so how people targeted me and found some information about me, it wasn't actually targeted per se. It was more of a phone scam, but it was very sophisticated. And so the preparation was the most important part for me because I wanted to make sure that I could communicate the challenges that I see day in, day out, but also target the masses from those kind of drive-by campaigns as well.
Yeah. No, I watched it yesterday, and I thought it was pretty good because it's I think it's interesting to see that from different perspectives because you talked about doing pretexting as well, you know, which is an interesting thing in pen testing because back when I pen tested, we had certain people in the firm that were willing to do social engineering, and then certain ones that weren't because it actually conflicted with their personal ethics. Where even if they were hired to lie to the employees of a customer, they weren't comfortable doing that. So we had very specific people that excelled and were comfortable doing different things.
It's very interesting. We in a few different occasions we've used people who are not trained penetration testers for these jobs. For example, your sales team are often your most proficient on the phones and more comfortable facing objections and things like that. And when you're really assessing high security facilities and places who you're automatically going to meet that resistance, if you haven't necessarily got that technical objective in mind, it can allow you to be more dynamic. And so I completely understand that ethical boundary. And to be honest, I don't do any of those kind of engagements anymore, to be honest. I'm much more business centric with leading culture and growth of the business. But that was an engagement where I was the person that was going to try and obtain access the first time, mainly with just a genuine reason, but I couldn't disclose the reason to the person behind the desk. And therefore I was playing on their more vulnerable side because I had traveled 3 hours and I was there for that meeting and I couldn't touch any of the data without being in the premise and all of these sorts of things. And so it is an inner conflict for sure. But if you're doing it for the right purposes and then you're able to provide the improvements, it gives you that sense of being able to make these improvements so someone can't do it for malicious purposes.
Yeah, and to dive into the conversation here, I feel like my co-hosts are kind of rearing to go on this topic. Everybody seems excited about it, but certainly for me personally, one of my irritations is the idea that the humans are the weakest link is something that we hear all the time, and every time I hear that, I think that's only possible if we don't realize that humans are a part of our business, because we understand humans are fallible, humans are going to make mistakes, so for them to be the weakest link, we would have to not prepare at all, for humans being part of this. It's why the world around us has things like traffic lights and crosswalks. It's why flying cars aren't a thing. We can barely handle them on the ground, much less in the air with an extra dimension thrown in. So it seems madness to me to say, there's just, what can you do? People are going to click links. And if your entire organization is just a single employee clicking a link away from devastation, I feel like you've designed things very, very wrong. So that's kind of why I was excited about this conversation, because it gets into, gets past that point of, okay, yes, humans are going to make mistakes. We can try to train them, but, we know we're never going to hit 100%. So what can we do about our culture to actually, encourage people to make less mistakes, make sure it's okay to make mistakes? Because there's certainly another direction that you can go here, a much sharper, more varying direction. And I've seen many companies do it where you fail a phishing test and you get written up. You fail too many phishing tests and people are firing their employees for not being good at, stopping phishing.
It's quite remarkable, to be honest, that shift in that direction, because you mentioned a really interesting point around the flying cars and things like that. Tesla is one of the most public hypergrowth organizations out there, and they're literally trying to reduce the amount of fatalities on the road through system automation and the processing power that can exist. Okay, that's a controversial topic, whether we're there or not, and those sorts of things. But you're absolutely right. The human is a part of the kill chain. Your employees can be more empathetic and more understanding, and therefore that can be exploited, right? That's exactly what I was talking about previously. And so if you are taking the approach around the performance-based, if you click so many, you are punished via these methods, that's only going to instill fear, and that's only going to instill more issues to really exist within your economy. So, Ron was talking about it in the previous segment, and I thought he hit the nail on the head around, your intelligent individuals. You don't want to assess a fish on its ability to climb a tree, for example. And so if you assess everybody on their ability to be able to detect a phishing email, the people, interested in this community are are more likely, based on your standardized drive-by phishing emails, to do so than someone who maybe works in manufacturing or finance or healthcare or something in that domain where it's not technologically focused. And so I think the transition in the culture, from my perspective, and something, because I feel very passionately about this, because I've seen that exact example take place where the phishing campaign was so targeted. They were already on the inside. They were just trying to get a better foothold from a true employee, and they chose to punish this individual, right? Now, business pressures, needing to make an example, things like that, put to a side, that's an incredibly difficult position for that individual to be in, because at that time, you can do all of the training in the world that you like on a certain day with certain circumstances, with certain conversations. Most people who work in the security industry would be able to create a phishing, a successful phish, I believe. And so where I think organizations should shift should be the mean time to respond and the mean time to detect when something has actually gone wrong. And that's by enabling a culture of almost acceptance and knowing that something's going to go wrong one day. That's exactly what Ron said in the previous segment. Something's going to go wrong at some point. The better you are prepared, the more available and the readier you are to actually respond to this. And so, for example, if you have a culture where if you click a phishing email and you're more likely to be punished than supported, I think it's illogical for people to expect people to try and report those things further upstream and do the right thing and help prevent that next stage ransom attack with the MO.
They're going to hide it.
The next ransomware operator.
They're going to hide it, right?
Exactly. And so if you're in a position where you know the security team or you know the IT team, and you're not the kind of person that picks up the phone and shouts at them because something's broken on your device. There are people too. If you become a more conclusive and supportive ecosystem, your results can be quite drastic, to be honest. And that also goes from consultancy functions, managed services, and everything associated. If they feel like I may have done something wrong here, I'd rather check, as opposed to I think I clicked something, I don't know the impact, but I know if I've clicked that, I won't get a bonus at the end of the year. I'm probably going to roll the dice and take my chances. And so it's quite a hanging in the balance position for that individual. When if you go so hard in the other direction, now it might not work at all scales, but it certainly works, to some capacity within, sub 20,000 seats for sure, because you're able then to prevent things on a more consistent basis and actually detect those issues, revoke MFA sessions, enforce password resets, the simple basic security controls before that more nefarious individual's got their hands on something if they've done the classic Microsoft 365 password reset phishing campaign, failed for that.
Right. And with the thesis there out of the way, Katie, I think you had an interesting question about folks that get confused about the term culture, about what culture is.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and it was triggered a little bit yesterday when there was that story about a French employee who was fired for not fitting into culture. This is sort of tangentially related, but talking about culture and what fit means. I guess just to set a baseline, when you talk about culture, what does that mean to you?
To me personally, I think you need to align with your company values and the company goal. And I think that itself can create a culture of a similar ecosystem where people are in the same boat, moving in the same direction. And you get toxic individuals and toxic, self-centered agendas at times, which can try to, break that apart or have an ulterior motive. New ideas are very important, but there's different ways in which you can kind of endorse them. And so to me, a positive working culture is where you're there to support that common goal and not punish people for things that can occur at a moment's notice, where there's so many different variables, and it's not just we've told you 1,000 times that this particular thing factually may occur, and you've done it again. Now, there's different scales to all of this, but for me, that's the nuts and bolts of what a culture should entail, and it should be like-minded people on a similar goal. working collaboratively?
I think where a lot of companies get caught up in the term culture and fit is mistaking people who are working towards a company goal, a financial goal, a product goal, a mission goal, with the idea of like-minded thinking, i.e., having cliques of people or having people who all get along on a personal level as if it's more of a social club than a work environment. And I've certainly seen in my own life and with many friends and colleagues in the industries where there is almost like an in crowd at organizations. And that's not really why people should be hired. And that's not why, certainly not why they should be rewarded. That was part of the issue with this Frenchman who just won a major lawsuit against his company for being fired for not participating in these more social types of things. And I think there is an overlap, or not an overlap, but there can be a tendency to misconstrue what culture means with almost like this herd mentality. And it's one thing to have people who are very mission oriented and goal oriented and have a dedication to the company and doing their best. And it's a very different thing when you have people who are in this herd mentality, because there is a tendency for people to they want to fit in on a social level. They want to fit in on a personal level. And often those people get rewarded more than the people who will stand up and say, hold on a minute. They are seen as dissenters. They are seen as argumentative, instead of somebody who's maybe just asking the company or their manager or their colleagues to think about something from a different perspective. Because a couple of years ago, we were talking very, very much about the idea of diversity and diversity of thought, not just diversity in terms of, what's your gender breakdown, what's your, country breakdown, what's your age breakdown, what's your, all of those different personal demographic pieces of information, but diversity of thought and having people who will push boundaries to make companies, to make products and services better. Now there seems to be a little bit of a reversion to this idea of, hey, let's everybody fit in. And I do certainly think that there are instances, again, that I've personally seen and that I've had my friends and colleagues also talk about, where it's, hey, you have to fit in and be like everybody else. And that's not, in my personal opinion, what culture should be about. So I know that was a very long diatribe, but how do you differentiate between that? How do you adapt your culture? How do you make sure that your culture allows for individuality? Individuality in thought, individuality in work practices and habits. You don't want to encourage people to click links and put the company in danger. You certainly don't want to encourage people to just go completely rogue on projects. But how do you encourage that individuality of thought, work ethic, work habits, without going over to the line of we all must act the same and talk the same and be the same for us to have a culture that is ubiquitous, that is seamless, that is, whatever culture it is, if it's, Exonius or Tenchi or Jupiter One, or whatever the culture, whatever the company may be.
I think that's a really hard narrative to kind of summarize, but from my perspective with the organization, I actually pride myself on hiring people from different backgrounds, because I think if you hire people who have done the same master's degree or been to the same college and done the same curriculum, and they're there to do the same job, you're very much hiring from a centered pool, which in some industries works great. For example, Harvard Law and the like. But when you're presented with different challenges every single day, I think it's really important to enable people to use their backgrounds and use their ulterior skill sets to be able to utilize that when speaking to frustrated individuals, people who don't know left from right because they're in an instant scenario. And so we've hired people who have worked in healthcare. We've hired people who have been, manual laborers, your standard master's educated university path, people from military backgrounds, intelligence communities, and those sorts of things. And so with that itself, people bring lots of different ideas of way in doing things. But when it comes to hiring the right culture in particular, one of my favorite books is called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but in the book, it's not a very long book, but they assess people based on 3 criteria. And those criteria are humble, hungry, and smart. And humble being able to empathetic with people, and if you find something that's happened wrong, be able to support that individual in correcting the challenge and making sure it doesn't happen again by actually being there for that person, not naming and shaming and highlighting the issue, because that doesn't support necessarily the right behaviors. Smart being understanding human interaction and social economics, basically being able to have those conversations with different people, understanding not everybody speaks the same technological language or even the same dialect at all. And then having that hunger for the same mission, which is where I said about the boat leading in the same direction. And so that direction can take multiple different paths, but if the common goal is there, I think it allows people to move quite efficiently in the same direction. And so when you hire based on those criteria, and it's very much born out of the Simon Sinek performance versus trust relationship model. And so you could have a very high performer of low trust, which would be a toxic leader and a toxic individual, is how he says it when he spent time with the Navy SEALs. Or you could have a medium performer of high trust, who is a good leader, who is then able to facilitate those challenges and be able to be more transitional in the problem-solving capacity. And so when it comes to culture at scale, that's very much down to the line management. And I have experienced the same things as you with being pressured to fit in at times, but also to follow the same status quo with this is how we've always done it. Now, I think if you look at the way leadership now moves with people like Elon Musk, it's actually endorsed to challenge things in the appropriate ways. Whether you agree with that or not is something different. But some of the best technological advancements, improvements in design, customer beneficiaries has come from the team because we enable them to have the creativity and ability to be able to bring these ideas forward, and we try it and we put it into practice. And for example, that's because they see the challenges that are being faced on a daily basis. And so I think from my perspective, that's how we do it internally within my organization. But we also try to do that with the security teams that we operate with. So we have multiple managed service arms, and within the security operations arm, we spend time with the internal IT team to make sure that we understand exactly the challenges they're facing, to make sure that we're supporting and understanding their direction and where they want to get to. Because there is a fine balance with culture and the ways in which outliers are seen and things like that. But I think that comes down to the root cause of are they there to do the job, or are they there for social economics, being a part of a friendship group and things like that. And so it's definitely multidimensional, but using those 3 pillars for hiring your team and asking the right questions at the start, I think it allows you to have a bit more of an understanding around your values as an organization and where you're trying to get to.
Thank you.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks very much for the book recommendation. I agree 100% with the hiring people with different backgrounds. I think that's critical to really ensure that, like you said, not everyone has the same approach to the same problem. You want to have diversity in thought, specifically to come up with better solutions. We've done a lot of things in the past. They might not have worked, so let's move on to something new. You talked about hiring the right individual rather than the CV or resume, as we call it in the U.S. How do you feel we can improve the hiring process to both hire better and ensure a win-win between the organization and the new hire? And then I have a quick follow-up about culture after you answer that one.
I love that question so much. My journey into cybersecurity was irregular. I went to university or college to start with, but I didn't stay the course. I didn't see it through to the end because I wasn't seeing the benefit that I believed was appropriate. And the reason why I got my foot in the door and I worked my way up and moved multiple different companies, but eventually ended up where I am now, is because effectively someone took a chance on me based on my work ethic and what I felt passionate about, which was protecting people at the root cause, effectively. And when I'm hiring people, what I want to assess is what's your core value and why do you actually want to work in cybersecurity? Because to some, it's a sexy industry and it's fast-paced and things like that. But if you're not, I don't believe, if you're not in it for the right reasons, it's an incredibly difficult industry to survive in, really, because it's so fast-paced and the context in which information is transmitted is quite vast, and the challenges you'll face on a daily basis can be both very intense, but also, quite mundane with the amount of data that exists. And so I take that on because someone took a chance on me. And so I don't necessarily look at the ways in which people have got certain certifications or the right university course or college degree or number of years of experience, because I hired someone who has been with my team for a year, I think yesterday, and this individual on paper probably wouldn't have gotten interviews in your traditional capacity. Yet what this person did was spend 4 hours a day, studying and researching because that was his passion. And so if you then unlock that door for that individual and you start paying them a salary and they become on a hyper growth trajectory, they're very unlikely to let you down if you can enable them to grow in the right way. And, I think when you enable that kind of level of acceptance and understanding and put faith into these people, they grow at probably, 4 times the speed of someone who has come through the traditional pathway, because these individuals have had to, work for that opportunity and just be given a chance. We've done that a multitude of times. Now, it doesn't work for every organization and it doesn't work for every industry for sure. But I think hiring the right person, less so what their piece of paper says they can do, because anyone can lie on that piece of paper realistically, both protects the employee because they want to work for their passion and their goal based on it being the right person and right seat for that journey. But if it's not right, then there's things like probation periods to protect both sides anyway if it's not the right fit. And so for me, we've hired lots of people who have come from military leaving backgrounds because they approach problems in a different way. They are used to diverse environments where they're used to instant changing in circumstances. And one of the most important qualities that I try to understand is when something's not going right, how do you support your team? Are you the kind of people who's going to support your team when the back's up against the wall, or do you throw in the towel? And you can easily see that when you interview people based on why they want to be a part of a security operations team, for example, to protect organizations or people who work in healthcare and keep those people safe, because it's that sense of morality where they're able to achieve those things as a collective, because it's very hard to do that by yourself. And so that when that team ethic becomes ingrained in your culture, it can be really quite powerful. And I think that's why I choose not to hire based on the specifics of a resume in this instance, and understand more about the individual and give them an opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think that your key point there very much aligns with my thinking as well, that the resume is the first step or the first part of this, but really we want to look at beyond just that CV, beyond just that resume, and see what else is there. My follow-on is around since the company should support the employees as part of their culture, how should this culture and does this culture change or adapt as the company grows from, say, 25 to 50, 100 or more people? And additionally, how does hiring potentially change, or how should the hiring process change as it grows from under 100 people to 500 or even 1,000 people?
Again, that scaling question is a fantastic question, because going from that 25 to 50 to 100 to 250 seat organization, there is naturally going to be a shift in culture, because your leaders within the business then have greater responsibility and autonomy, and that's the way it should be. But choosing the right people to make sure they are consistent with that is a collaborative effort across the board, I believe. And so the business itself should make sure the mission statement collectively is your underlying message. And so I don't mean we are trying to hit this revenue goal. I mean, we are trying to protect people from being targeted by people who have nefarious, circumstances or purposes behind what they're trying to achieve. And if everybody's aligned to try and do good, for example, then you start with a baseline where everyone then is on board with that idea and that plan. But going through those motions of hiring huge tranches of individuals and making sure they are adopted into that culture starts with your foundation. If you're building on brick instead of sand, you're more likely to adopt those new hires into that same journey, because it can become very infectious. And when it becomes hyper effective as well, and people start to exceed their goals and their personal targets because of the support around them, it becomes a self-sustaining path of travel almost. And it becomes hyper effective, and it's not based on a single individual to make sure that continues, because everyone around you is aligned to that same goal. When you get into the thousands, it becomes more business unit focused, where the challenges are represented in different ways, for sure. But I think the underlying mentality and attitude will allow you to protect things in more dynamic capacities, whether you're an internal security team, whether you're, to be quite frank, in any department, this can be adopted in the same ways.
Yeah, so there, a bit of a, I don't know if it's an elephant in a room, but just kind of thinking through how the whole hiring process works, and thinking about this culture conversation that we're talking about. Like, one of the issues that I've observed is that a lot of it is us either lying to ourselves or lying to each other, or kind of a mix of both, right? Like, you hire somebody, they say, yeah, I'm going to be a great employee, never going to do any kind of quiet quitting or like, tell you that I'm working and do something else instead, or, I'm great, I don't have any flaws. My personal problem is I work too hard, all that, and then on the flip side, the employer's like, yeah, we're a great employer. Here's our company values. Of course, the company values are, I don't know if they're automatically generated by some machine somewhere, or, HR just kind of pulls them out of a hat, or, I've actually been a part of that process for a few startups of coming up with the values for the company. And, sometimes they're almost humorous, how much the values are actually, in real life flipped from what the company says that they are. And then there's, especially when there's an HR involved, there's all this culture that's kind of manufactured, that, like we're going to have Taco Tuesdays in the cafeteria, and, they just try and manufacture all these good feelings and things like that. And then, the things that actually matter, like how to respond to, an employee failing a phishing test or something like that. like there's this Twitter account that I'm following now that's hilarious, and it's basically like insider things, but I don't know how to describe it, but it's basically examples of these kinds of things, of like the company saying one thing, and then an employee, examples of the company doing the exact opposite of what they say. I guess it's the culture equivalent of we take your security and privacy of your data very seriously. Every company who's ever been breached has had that page on their web page. So with that in mind, I don't understand how we work past that, though, because at the same time, am I going to join your company if you tell me, yeah, here's our company values, but don't get in Phil's way when he throws a temper tantrum. He tends to throw chairs. Just make sure you keep clear of him when that happens. Like that tends to happen quietly in small groups later. Like you get filled in on what the actual company culture is once you're already part of the company, and maybe you're thinking this could have been a mistake. So sorry, that's a lot to dump on you right there, but I don't know. Is there a more straightforward, open way to tackle that, or does that have to be kind of this behind the scenes, thing that you work out one-on-one with employees?
I think it's really interesting listening to you say some of those things, because you start to reflect on instances and experiences you've had yourself, right? But I think the biggest differential that doesn't happen very much is people enabling their employees and their teams to equate to change. It's still very hierarchical in lots of organizations. But when you empower your teams to actually be able to make those changes, they feel empowered, which therefore equates to a positive working environment, underlying culture improves, and all of those sorts of things. And your staff retention goes up because they feel like, oh, I'm having an impact, and I'm having, I'm having an impact by turning up to work, and I feel like a part of something. And so I think that is a large part of where people and organizations can stunt growth and create more insular directions. For example, like you just said, where people feel they say one thing and they do another. If the team are saying they're going to do one thing because of X, Y, and Z, and they have the company backing or the line management backing, it becomes really, really powerful. And so, like you said, it's quite a lot to dissect, but the underlying tonality of that, it comes down to trust, and it comes down to the reason why people are actually there, I believe. And that may be naive, but I think if people are actually there for the right reason, cybersecurity is a very fast-paced culture, very fast-paced industry, like I said. And I think if you're in a position to be able to affect and impact change for the better of everyone around you, it allows for that to be adopted within the culture itself, because it's bigger than a single individual. Like you said, it's one person throwing chairs, etc. It becomes much more of a demonstratable direction within the way that the company operates. Things like Taco Tuesdays and things like that, okay, that's great, that's cherry on top stuff, but like you said, at the end of the day, it's more around how people are treated and how people are able to come into work and operate in a safe environment and be able to be effective in what they want to achieve as a collective or individually. Well, it's both. And so that scale of things is where things can become challenging, because you have people with different ideas and ulterior motives. But I think at the same time, that's a huge part of it in where you can grow as a company, because I've just said, hiring people from different backgrounds allows you to achieve the same thing in 70 different ways. Some are going to be more effective than others. And so by being able to make those statements and those presentations, it allows you for you to be effective and enable everybody to work together.
Gotcha. Sean, Tyler, anything? Anything else for Ryan?
I think probably the best part that I've heard around this discussion is really employee focused, especially in the cyber field where we tend to focus on blinky boxes and tools and things like that. Really investing in the people, giving them the resources. Ryan, I heard you say something around, identifying what that interest is that the person has, be it research or something else, and empowering them to be able to go in that direction. And that can really help the organization go in interesting ways that may not necessarily directly relate to the bottom line, but can help improve things overall, whether it's people feel empowered, such as along the lines of what you were talking about, Ryan, is making sure that people feel like they are part of something and they are helping to grow it. I think that's what matters. And hopefully I captured that, Ryan, in the way that you said it.
Absolutely. And I think Gary Vaynerchuk talks about understanding what makes people tick, because not everybody's going to be motivated by the same thing, and neither should they, because you don't hire everybody in the company for the same motivation, because other people are there to be very admin focused, to not let process fall down. Other people are very results driven and are more dynamic in the way that they are going to try and get to that end goal. Both very different perspectives, motivated by different things. For example, from my perspective, I'm motivated by longevity for my team and employees and everything that encapsulates that. But not everybody in the business is motivated by that same goal, because everyone's working on different career trajectories and people see things in different ways. It's the human nature, isn't it? And so, for example, what may be attractive to me may not be attractive to my team, and therefore I can't assess them based on what I believe I would do necessarily. It becomes much more focused around, is there a common goal and why they want to be in here, which is exactly what you said. And again, that comes from another Simon Sinek book, to be honest, called Start With Why, and it aligns you to be more understanding around the focus in which people want to achieve those things. And if people want to keep people safe effectively within a security operations perspective, or say you're a penetration tester and working in offensive security and you want to identify the problems before somebody else does and be able to help people fix it, that's ticking that box in your underlying focus as an individual. Then you need to make sure the company culture is right, and your salary expectations and working environment, and it works for you personally and your home life and everything else. And so if you can understand that as a person instead of here's the job, it's a different way of looking at things. It's more difficult to hire potentially, but I think the retention is much, much higher, where people end up staying and your tenure becomes a lot more long term.
Well said, Ryan. And that is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And The Ideal Team Player, I think, was the other book that you mentioned, by Patrick Lencioni.
That's the one.
All right, good stuff. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been great.
I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
I think somewhat cathartic as well. All right, we'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly Enterprise News.
Attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Register at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP.
Managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. When it comes to cybersecurity, the biggest threats are the ones you never see coming. SecureWorks detects and responds to cyber attackers' ever-changing tactics. We come armed with Taegis, a security analytics platform designed to recognize attacks and stop them before they do harm. SecureWorks, defending every corner of cyberspace. Learn more at securityweekly.com/SecureWorks.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Follow us on Twitter for live stream reminders, highlighted clips, memes, and more. You can find us at Sec Weekly. Same thing, I think, on Mastodon also, which we are playing with right now, in case Twitter has an unfortunate accident. And now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. Check out securityweekly.com/ESW298 if you want to check out the stories that we're going to be talking about today and read my notes. And not a whole lot of funding this week. We've got 3 items. 2 of those just popped up pretty recently. I guess it's understandable people don't want to announce financing during Thanksgiving week. A lot of U.S.-based companies in cybersecurity, a lot of U.S.-based investors as well. So, yeah. See, 2 kind of mid-size Series B, a 31 million Series B for Sphere. And I had kind of a hard time figuring out what they do, to be honest. They said identity hygiene. It's clearly around identity. But I don't know how.
So it's really interesting that there is I'm seeing it in multiple deals, multiple pitches. I'm getting this at this point as an investor. I feel like identity-based security is about to make a leap. I've also seen it in some of the new stuff put out by Gartner in the 2022 trends. As we move into 2023, identity-based cybersecurity is becoming a new hot item. I feel like Sphere is doing something around that. Not exactly sure specifically what they're doing, but identity hygiene is kind of becoming a hot topic that I'm seeing a lot of funding money go towards. I can't speak specifically for Sphere because, again, it's one of those scenarios where it's jargon soup by a potentially mediocre agency for the press release, so it's tough to know for sure.
And they're 13 years old and only in a Series B, so I suspect it was maybe one of these situations where they were more of a services company and are now building a product and raising funds to build that product. But I'm just guessing.
Yeah, ForgePoint, they're not dummies, right? ForgePoint does great investments, and so there's got to be something there. There's got to be some reason. Also, a $35 million B is tiny compared to what it was in the old days, right? So either this is the new sizing, or maybe it's the right sizing for a company that's growing in a healthy way. So it's interesting. We always used to poo-poo the kind of the companies that were services, pro-serve based companies that are then converting to product, right? Because, okay, you bootstrapped your company with ProServe. Now you're trying to get into products so you can get a better multiple and eventually sell the company, right? That's kind of the game plan. But what's interesting now is almost like a ProServe-based function could be a much healthier-based company than some of the traditional high flyers in VC, given what matters to investors now. What matters to investors is efficient use of funds resulting in hopefully profitable companies, right? The more traditional version of what makes a company good. And so it's going to be neat to see whether some of these ProServe to product plays, not whether Sphere is that or not, I'm not sure, but some of these ProServe to product conversions become more of a hot button with the investment community.
You think maybe that can be problematic though? Like, having two sides of the business there, that, maybe some competition with each other or, difficulty focusing on building the product, or vice versa. I mean, it's certainly nice to have the services to be able to back the product. You can do implementation stuff. You can, you don't have to worry about initial growth nearly as much because you already have revenue coming in. Certainly taking some money creates some of that pressure that you would have if that's the only thing you were doing, I would expect. But also, I wonder if in some ways it can make it harder having services as well. Especially like question. Really well-established services.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Different ways to do it too.
Traditionally, I'll hand it to you when I'm done. Traditionally, the ProServe side of the business has gotten a very low multiple. So as soon as you take in invested capital into like a venture to push forward product, they want much higher growth, much higher return, things like that. And as a business, it's very difficult to deliver high return and kind of slow, healthy growth at the same time, which is what makes it a little bit more difficult. But if we're seeing a massive compression in venture-backed valuations and expectations on growth rates to be a more healthy growth rate, it may begin to unify these two to make it an easier version of building a business. But you're right. I think there's all sorts of difficulties that come in play when you have a ProServe business that also does products. I just don't think it's as dangerous as it was prior to the macroeconomic collapse. So over to you, Sean. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways to do it and do it smartly. Certainly, if a company has grown doing certain services that they then are able to transition over to a product and they've leveraged that knowledge and experience and existing customer base in order to expand, that's one way that seems like it could be successful. If they have transitioned from their services into this product, that's another interesting way. And then shifting over to, as I believe Adrian was talking about, using pro services to help deploy and support and continue that. That's pretty interesting also. But I don't know, Tyler, what do you think about those two different approaches? Which do you think is more successful, or does it really matter or depend on the goal of the company and what the product is actually doing?
It's all goal dependent. I don't think it matters too much. I think it's a function of doing what's going to give you the healthy returns as a business that are going to then throw off the correct amount of capital to the investors, or if there's no investors, the correct amount of capital to you as the founder of the company, right? I think there's a million different ways to build businesses. Literally, there's as many different ways as there are ideas. And it's just a function of matching the market, the product, the expectations of growth, the expectations of invested return, and the potential for the business. And things get difficult when those gears in the complex system become out of whack with each other, right? And so, yeah, you have to look at the entirety of that complex system and understand it and manage it as one big system.
Yeah, so the next one here gets some special bonus points for me, Pangea, because they use a lot of Jurassic Park examples on their website. Their little, kind of animated GIF demos. Yeah, there's some Dennis Nedry in there, which I appreciate it. And I appreciate the, I don't know how unique this is for security. I think you see this a lot in DevOps and on the IT side of things, on the dev side of things. I haven't seen many pure play security companies with this kind of, like we're building these easily integratable API-based security functions that you can build into your applications, which is what Pangea does. They're trying to call it secure platform as a service, but I'm not a big fan of that because that could be anything, right? Like Palo Alto Prisma could be a secure platform as a service. It's just a bit too nebulous for me. But then, I don't know what else you call this. I don't know if anybody else has seen more specific names for this kind of service.
Huh. If only it were that easy. There's so much here, so much different things. Like the website's a little, I'm on the purpose page in particular, and it's a little bit difficult to grok everything that is there as a purpose or as a product. I see, it's an SPA, actually. It's a single page. So the whole thing is just tough to grok. I wish they had some clarity on message, because I think fundamentally, if I distill out and say, hey, is there a platform we can use to build our applications that are going to create applications in a secure manner from the ground up? I love that in theory as an idea. I have no idea, based on the difficulty to understand their website, if they can deliver that. But in theory, I like it.
It's really not that. It's specific functions. It's like, okay, if you need a secure audit log, they have that. If you need to be able to redact information on your app, they have a widget for that. So it's almost like functions that you're buying.
Right, which if you group those functions, I would consider them a platform that you can build secure applications on top of. But you are correct, right? Functionally, it's a grouping of functions, no pun intended, I guess. It does actually fit another investment thesis I have, which is focusing on API-driven security, which I really like the concept of, because at the end of the day, if we can use APIs to secure our system in automated ways, similar to the way we've taken functions and moved those off into third-party SaaS applications that are essentially APIs. If the more we can move into APIs, the more we can kind of distribute the workload amongst technologies or vendors or clouds. Things get a lot easier to implement over time. Is now the right time for it? Am I too early? I don't know. But if that is what they're doing, is distributing security functionality via APIs, I like it in theory. I like the idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's just they're very specific application building blocks, basically.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing here that's going to tell you that your application is insecure or anything like that. It's like, well, we've got to pull in files from our customers, so we need some way to check those files and make sure that there's nothing malicious in the files that customers are uploading into our app. So they have a widget for that, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we think about like, why is Apple iPhones more? Why don't we see massive iPhone attacks? Right? Sure, there's some flaws. I get it, and things.
Or
there
Android,
are there, or Android for that matter, but mobile in general. It's because all of the security stuff is actively built in a reasonable way. It's not perfect. There's no perfection there. But what if we could do something similar for traditional compute, right? And to do that, you'd have to distribute that workload via APIs, which is what they're seeming to try to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I remember talking to Josh Corman about that years and years ago when he was working on his rugged software thing and DevOps with Gene and Kim. Yeah, good stuff. Sorry, Spaff and Gene Kim. Gene Kim is one person. Sorry. made him sound like two people. I'm still not 100%, folks.
Yeah, for those of you that can't tell, Adrian is working at like perfect capacity today. He's at his top-notch self.
All right, let's. So Palo Alto Networks finally did a deal here. We've seen several vendors, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, I think maybe even SentinelOne. There've been a few of these really big players that have kind of replaced the McAfees and the Symantec's that have been struggling to find a buy. And it sounds like it's all been around getting people, getting the acquiree and the acquirer to agree on a valuation, which I guess nobody knows what the valuations are supposed to be anymore. So a lot of these deals have kind of fallen apart because, I can only assume the acquirer is too low and the acquiree is too high, and they're just not finding a middle ground that they can agree on.
Totally agree. And that's exactly the problem we're having. I would have expected a much higher quantity of acquisitions to have occurred at this point in cyber. But I think it's exactly what you're describing. The overheated investment world created egos, founder egos, investor egos that are high. Investor egos are probably not the bigger problem, because the investors, that's financial math, right? They do specific financial math here that says this is profitable, not profitable, take write-downs, don't take write-downs, et cetera. So it's easier for them to say, okay, I'm going to take these write-downs because in the future we're going to grow results in these other ways. But I think founders and founders hold the majority of equity in these situations through certain stages, through like, let's say A or B. Those acquisitions come with founders who are like, hey, a year ago I was worth 800, 900 million. Now the most I can get is 300. Oh, no, I'm just going to hold if that's the case. And it's funny, I think at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you can pocket 300 million. You own 30%. You can pocket 60 million of that, or 90 million of that in your own pocket. Or, you can hold on and try to make 600 million and you'll pocket 180 million in your pocket. And I always tell founders, look, either way, you're still flying private, buddy. What difference does it make, And I think some of these early stage founders are going to have a day of reckoning where they have to come down to reality of what the current market for their businesses are. It's no longer as high as it once was.
Yeah, I've seen a few specifically kind of shun some acquisition offers, and I remember kind of shaking my head to myself, thinking, "You might regret that later."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The crush is real, folks. The crush is real.
Yeah, the number of asks to the dance that you get as you grow larger and take more money tends to go down pretty drastically, pretty quickly.
Yep.
So there's this Tyler. You want to talk about the Building Cyber Collective here? I think you're more aware of it, or not. We're both aware of it, but I think you're a bit deeper into it than I am.
Yeah, I wish I could say I've dived, gotten super in depth with it. I did read through the majority of the main content. I like what I see. I like the concept. It's put on by a gentleman named Ross, and I'm going to mutilate his last name. So Ross, if you're listening, I apologize. Ross Halaluik. He's head of product at Lima Charlie, but he also does a lot of writing. He puts out a newsletter, which I love. And of course, the minute I say it, I can't remember the name of the newsletter, but I subscribe to his newsletter. I love it. He puts out a lot of great content. And he started something that is he's calling the Building Cyber Collective, which is intended to bring together advisors, investors, and founders in new cyber companies. Basically, if you sign up as an advisor, you commit to providing a certain level of service, 4 hours of free consulting for startups, and then you can figure out where that takes you from there, right? And here's the interesting thing. It's exactly how I got into cyber investing. I started just doing advisor roles where I'd meet a founder and say, hey, what can I do to help you? And I didn't put a time limit on it, but in essence, I would do an hour a week or an hour a month or a couple hours a month. And eventually they came back and said, hey, can you help us do XYZ? We'll give you an advisor role, or we'll move you into an investor role, whatever those cases may be. And that's exactly what he's trying to foster, is that karma-based, hey, let's help each other build new cyber companies, and then we will all collectively reap the rewards. So it's kind of like a accelerator meets an advisor studio or something. I really like the idea.
Yeah, me too.
Oh yes, and you're right. Venture in Security is the name of his newsletter. Thank you, Adrian.
Yep, I'm here for you.
Yeah,
I was looking it up while you were talking. Prelude, I found very, very interesting. They have a community tier, and it's a product that you download and install, and it looks like it's a breach and attack simulation product. So they generate these different scenarios, these different tests that you can run in your environment to test your different security controls, which is something I've been in love with for a long time. I worked for an attack simulation, a breach and attack simulation vendor at one point. Haven't had a chance to check this out before, but it sounds really exciting.
Yeah,
it's called Prelude Orchestrator or Operator. Sorry.
Yeah, no, this website's a little confusing as well, but it's I believe in the space too. Another one of my friends recently started a similar concept. So I've been talking a lot about cloud security. We talked about it in the first segment, how cloud security is rapidly disrupting all of cyber. And I think in some ways, the transition to cloud, not cloud security, but the transition to cloud is disrupting all of cyber. And I think that's what this really is, because we've had continuous security testing kind of from a DAST approach to websites for a long time now, right? You say, here's my domain, continue to scan it for network and for app attacks or whatever. We've had that for a while. But how does it shift or change when we are using APIs, when we are using cloud native workloads, when we're using cloud native functions? That's the fundamental difference where I think some of these newer companies like Prelude and the new company that I'm talking about, which I don't want to say quite yet because he's still in stealth, they're taking a new approach to, it doesn't matter how you design the applications, it doesn't matter how you build them in a true cloud native modern way, we will be able to continually assess that universe, be it through asset management and configuration states, be it through continuous dynamic testing, be it through maybe SAST in some kind of unique SAST approach. I think there's some reinvention here that I'm pretty excited about, actually. AppSec meets cloud.
Well, and this isn't so much about vulnerability management. A lot of this, I think for me, one of the most valuable use cases of this is, are my tools even sending alerts to the right places? This is, we're going to simulate the attack. Do people actually know that the attack happened? And this is something Ryan was talking about is one of the improvements, they're looking for in terms of, the human angle is knowing that an attack happened sooner and quicker and being able to respond to it sooner. Well, you can't do that if your tools are misconfigured and you're not getting an alert when an attack happens. We know tools have gaps, things that they're going to miss. And to me, the whole, BAS space should be about, hey, is my stuff actually turned on? Is it working? Is it monitoring the right things? We hear these horror stories of, the IDS was plugged into the wrong span port, or the span port was misconfigured.
Yeah.
It wasn't seeing the right traffic. I love to use examples from Equifax, and there was one example there where the emerging threats team wrote a snort rule for the struts vulnerability. Then they handed it off to the SecOps team, and the SecOps team threw it on the IDS. Neither team tested that snort rule to see if it worked. It didn't work.
Yeah, that's a great point about gaps there, Adrian, because the issue that we've seen, we do security assessments all the time with large companies and small, and one of the things that we see consistently is companies and organizations not understanding where those gaps are, where those blind spots are, as far as alerting the events. First of all, are the events getting logged on the system that matter? Is the event flow from those systems flowing into a central logging system, be it a SIM or something else? And then what is the output of that? Is there something that's an intelligent alert to alert the SOC operators and or other people so that they are able to take action for it? Because there's several different parts of that chain. And the final one should be, okay, if this alert happens, this is the action that needs to take place, whether that's an incident that gets spun up, remediation, or is there some sort of automatic or manual action that has to occur around that? From what I've seen, most enterprises are not prepared for the attacks that are happening today or even have appropriate visibility around it. So something that could help test it more easily and give them that insight, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree completely. But what I was getting at, because I totally agree, like that's a very important aspect of what they're building. It's kind of the extension of BAS into a more modern environment, though, that excites me. So they have this concept of an operator, which is a free production-ready infrastructure for continuously testing your systems. What does testing your systems mean? Like, there's lots of different ways to test your systems. And if the system design has changed from traditional BAS to this modern universe, so that a new BAS has to be created. I think it has to follow both things. I think it has to be able to understand the new style infrastructures to do continuous tests that are pertinent to that model for the result of what you guys are talking about, which is to make sure that the stuff on the backside is properly configured right.
Right. Yeah. And traditionally, BAS has been all about detecting lateral movement, though I imagine it's moved beyond that by now.
It has to. If it doesn't, it'll be left behind, because lateral movement in what regard? Lateral movement in a traditional data center is very, very different than lateral movement in a modern deployment.
And all very agent based. And this one also does appear to be agent based, where you have to install agents to actually run the tests, and some of them require agents on both ends, because one of the features is like the agent on the other end will, confirm, yes, I saw the attack. So it tends to be more for like segmentation testing and stuff like that, which I think is a little bit less useful. I think it's more important to use this to test your actual security operations team. Your is your SOC, all the money you're spending on your SOC, any use at all, or are they going to miss every attack that this thing throws out?
So, Prelude folks, if you see this or hear this, please reach out to me. I want a demo. I'd love to hear more about it so I can talk more intelligently about your market. Super cool idea.
Yeah, they do have I forget where it was, but there is a good video somewhere where they...
And they have a blog too. feed.prelude.org is the great blog.
Good stuff. Moving on, Revelstoke SOAR looks like a Tynes competitor. Another zero code kind of drag and drop, build your if this then that security automation scenarios, and really nice animated GIF on the front page there. I love it when they do that, when you can just like stare at that animated GIF, be like, okay, yeah, I get the core of what you do here.
Yes, absolutely fantastic. No, yeah, it's funny if you scroll down. They've got a big square. SOAR is dead, long live SOAR, which is how many times I've declared markets dead over the last 15 years of analyzing markets. They've all died and been reinvented 1,000 times. But
that was our job. It was our job to declare things dead.
Yeah, exactly. This is dead. This is dead.
We were analysts.
The network is the computer, right?
But, in our defense, though, Adrian, we were, and that's exactly why we were declaring stuff dead. But at the same time, stuff gets reinvented constantly. All these markets are getting reinvented to handle new things. Like if we just take the cloud stuff that I was talking about, cloud is causing every cyber piece to be reinvented. APIs being the motivating factor of how applications work today is causing SOAR to be reinvented, because now you can automate huge things with the response side of it, which is why I love Tynes. I love all of those companies that are doing this kind of SOC automation explosion. Now, is it a new SOAR? I don't care what you call it. Leave it to the analysts to declare a market dead and declare this the new SOAR. Whatever the case may be, I think at the end of the day, automation is coming from the fact that we are now API derived as a security vendor community, as well as how we build all of our applications today. So I think the concept is really cool. I hope they are very successful in what they're doing.
Yeah. It's just, a lot of security products haven't really done a very good job with usability, and SOAR V1 is definitely in that camp. Yeah. We had, I forget the guy's last name, but Ryan from Brooks Running, who we've had on a show a couple times. He was talking about, like, with one of the V1 SOAR vendors, it took 6 months what he was able to do with a V2 vendor in like a couple hours. So it was just night and day, the difference in the amount of effort you need to put in to have something usefully automated.
Yeah. This is going to be a massive space. I don't know who wins it. There's a lot of players in it, but it's going to be a massive space.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And it's and the nice thing is with most of these, you can build libraries. So you can build it once, share it with other people, obviously without your credentials and stuff like that plugged into your workflow. And, Tynes calls them stories. I don't know what this company calls them. Sometimes they're recipes, sometimes they're workflows. But I love that people can take their creativity and share it, and there's a library where you can go and get ideas for how to be more productive.
Yep, I'm a big fan.
Me too. And we were talking about DSPM earlier. I think in our first interview, Ron even mentioned Wiz as a big up and comer here. And sure enough, they're in his space. They're the first non-pure play DSPM. So I guess we should expect the Laceworks and the Orcas to either acquire their way in or build DSPM in house in the near future.
Wiz is in everybody's space.
This is also another example of a category becoming redefined, right? To a degree, this is just an evolution of some of the data security things that we've built in the past, some of which worked, some of which didn't. But this is an adaptation for modern workplaces. And, it's yet to be determined how well this works. But it is just a reinvention.
Yep. Yeah, it's so I tend to throw V2 on the end of a lot of these things. SOAR V2, DLP V2. I mean, obviously, it's you can't directly compare it to DLP because the way we were implementing DLP, where we were implementing it, is very different from how DSPM is doing it today. But ultimately, the goal is still the same. It's where's my data? What kind of data is it? How would I classify it? And what's it doing? Where is it going? And where do I have problems? Is it in places that it shouldn't be? And it's really, really tough problem to solve. And with each year it gets harder and harder as we encrypt in more and more layers. It's just really tough.
Yep.
Data is a tough one. You can't install an agent on data. All right, so number 9 here. This actually just came out this morning. Came off embargo this morning. But yet another case where researchers were able to pull back the curtain and access multi-tenant break on the IBM's cloud here, access other customers, with kind of a chain of different things that they found in this case. I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but it's not particularly unique in that it's yet another tenancy break. But they're trying to say it's unique, I think, because the method was using something that wasn't IBM's, was using Postgres SQL. I'm not sure I fully understood what they were saying was unique about it either, but certainly not a great thing. But of course, all of these, when we hear about them, they're already fixed. So that's, I guess, a good thing. You don't have to wait for people to patch when it's somebody's cloud. At least it all gets patched at once, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, I've been around breaking stuff for 20 years, right? I was a cybersecurity consultant doing research back in the early 2000s, right? Finding zero-day. Back then, you find something, you were lucky to pop, one binary, and then you had to figure out how to get in and execute the flaw into the binary. Then we moved into web, and it was like, okay, you pop one website. The massive risk of pop one, grab everything didn't exist. Now, like with cloud, literally you pop a cloud, you can be jumping from customer to customer to customer and compromise the universe, right? So that's the downside. The upside is when we went to fix a flaw, we had to contact each individual vendor to get things fixed, and it took forever. And how do you distribute repairs to binaries to, 5,000 customers? We're also in a situation now where it's significantly less time to repair problems, right? Because of a vulnerability found in IBM Cloud, for example, they contact IBM Cloud. Hopefully nobody else knows about it, although that's an argument we can have on a later date. But, at the end of the day, IBM hopefully can patch that quickly and all customers are fixed fast, right? So it's got an upside and a downside when cloud compromises or CSP compromises come around. But I don't see why anybody would research anything other than cloud or CSP compromises, because that's where the value really is today.
You're right. It is so big. I mean, there was issues that were talked about in the past year or so about Azure. I mean, the Cosmos DB, when you have this multi-tenant type structure where a database stores information about lots of different companies and lots of organizations' data, going after that platform is the way to get to something. Now, it's kind of like dropping onto almost like dropping into a virtual host that hosts a number of instances, because you don't necessarily know what you're going to get behind it, but you could get something pretty big as an attacker, and that could be very interesting.
My favorite one is still where if you were on Azure for a time, if you knew the ID of somebody's disk, you could mount that disk.
Oh my!
Any disk on Azure was just wide open if you knew the actual object ID for the disk.
Oh wow! Well, one of my coworkers figured out a way to get Amazon AWS log files to go to his system or his tenant versus others, and if most of the organizations that were on there, I believe that's been fixed. If they didn't have it configured to explicitly define the log file location or destination, then there was a way that you could actually end up getting it accidentally. So yeah, cloud's pretty interesting from a security perspective.
Nobody puts sensitive stuff in log files, so that's cool.
No, that's totally safe. But Adrian, do you remember if those disk IDs were predictable or sequential?
I don't know if they're predictable, but they certainly weren't kept secret. So like a lot of people would go, to forums and stuff like that and post their logs and stuff like that, which would have, Microsoft. So Azure has object IDs for everything. Your user account has an object ID, disk has an object ID, instances do. So they definitely weren't treated as sensitive, and Microsoft didn't tell you to treat them as sensitive. So yeah, it was not designed intentionally that way. It was one of those things that was overlooked. It would just mount anybody's disk if you threw that in there. So, I mean, I'm sure there's enough disks on there you could fat finger a few things and just load something, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it was at least semi-predictable, maybe not fully predictable, but still massive problem.
Yeah. I mean, if they were sequential, even worse.
Yeah.
Speaking of even worse, number 13. I say the EU, but I mean specifically this is Germany coming out and basically saying, after 2 years of negotiations with Microsoft, the Joint Committee of the German Federal Data Protection Authority and 17 state regulators published a devastating statement that essentially says that organizations currently cannot use Microsoft 365 in a lawful way under the GDPR.
Wow.
This is a very interesting one. First of all, because Germany has their own instance effectively of Azure, which is structured that way. There's a few separate Azures in the world. One is US GovCloud. There's commercial, obviously. There's China, and there's Germany. Those are the key ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So Germany has their own instance of Azure. So the perspective of saying that it's not GDPR compliant is interesting also. There's the EU GDPR. UK has done some additions to it. I imagine Germany has some changes as well, though I haven't seen that recently. But that's a very interesting statement from that perspective, because obviously GDPR is pretty big in the EU.
The PDF is in German, but I don't know about Google Translate, but I use DeepL is the translation tool that I use, and you can pass a PDF through it, and that's how I read the PDF here. So yeah, be interesting to see the fallout from that. I'm sure Microsoft will have to respond to that. Let's see. I think it's time to go to squirrel stories.
Let's do it. Squirrel it up.
So my first squirrel story here is, again, coming back to looking at the interesting and potentially horrible things going on in the world of AI and automatically generated content. And so there are not one. I only linked one of them here, but there are at least two projects that will automatically generate stories for kids. And they're not just like open source GitHub, like here's a thing I threw together. They have pricing. Yeah, so starting at $9, you can create 10 stories. Beautiful illustrations, they say. and this is the part, this is the reason I included this one, is they're using DALL-E. Like, I didn't even check on this. Like, you can tell if you've ever seen anybody use DALL-E 2, it butchers faces. The faces, it turns out, look like the survivors of stepping on landmines, like horrific stuff. They look horrific.
It looks like if somebody carved a body out of butter and then stuck it in the microwave for 3 seconds.
Look at Sophia's garden.
That's what I'm looking at right now. It's disturbing. It is absolutely disturbing.
And it looks like the teddy bear below that has an eyeball on its bicep. Like, don't show this to your kids before they go to bed. The other one, and I'm kicking myself now for not having the name ready, doesn't include the images. Thankfully, I think it was inspired to say, hey, we can not only use AI to generate the story, but we can use it to generate images to go along with the story. But then I can't believe they even use these on their webpage.
This is brutal.
They went with the one that butchers faces, and
Ruby and the teddy bear is bizarre. He's apparently the teddy bear is skydiving, and on the front chest of his parachute or vest he's wearing looks like a squirrel or a rat made out of metal. It is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. But I don't know if you noticed this, Adrian, too, when you're playing with it. If you scroll between pages, the images are not the same every time. They actually don't match the image to the words very well. And I think they've got a bug, and the images don't always stay properly set up.
Yeah. So should we create some enterprise security weekly stories?
Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. And I'm sure if we use our names, they might even be able to find some images of us to mutilate.
That'll be our gift to our listeners. Is we'll create maybe some security weekly Christmas stories with this tool.
Yeah, I'm in. Sounds fantastic.
I'll see if I can rope Paul into it also. Maybe do it for some of the other shows. I think it'd be fun. And our last squirrel story here is Cocaine Bear. And the reason Cocaine Bear is here, apparently a lot of people have heard of this. I've never heard of this, but Knoxville is involved here, which is the reason I threw it in here. A movie that I'm sure is going to be very, very loosely based on the true story is coming out February 24th. And one of Ray Liotta's last performances before he passed away. And about a drug smuggler that threw a bag of cocaine out of a plane and a bear got into it. And they found the bear later that had apparently eaten, I forget how many pounds of cocaine and just overdosed from all the cocaine. Yes.
The premise on Wikipedia is amazing. After ingesting a duffel bag full of cocaine, an American black bear goes on a murderous rampage in a small Kentucky town where a group of locals and tourists must join forces in order to survive his attack.
That sounds pretty amazing.
It's a who's who of people. Kerry Russell, O'Shea Jackson Jr. I mean, literally, like Ray Liotta. There's some really big name people in this movie. It is a must-watch, absolute horror fest. I cannot wait for this to come out.
Yeah, and O'Shea Jackson Jr. is Ice Cube's son, who's been in other movies as well. So that'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah, he was in the that NWA biopic a while back,
which was fantastic.
Was an excellent movie. Absolutely. Yeah, Cocaine Bear. I'm a big fan of Cocaine Bear. I want a T-shirt that's the Cocaine Bear cover art. I just want that on my T-shirt. It just says Cocaine Bear.
So the bear was actually in North Georgia, but what the guy does is he drops this bag out. I don't know if he wanted to lose weight or if he planned to go back and pick it up later. But him and an accomplice jump out of the plane, both experienced skydivers, and he's got like another. I don't know how many kilograms of cocaine, 75 pounds, in another duffel bag with him. And something goes wrong with his parachute, and he face plants in a driveway in Knoxville, Tennessee, wearing Gucci loafers, a bulletproof vest, night vision goggles, 75 pounds of cocaine, $4,500 in cash. This is in 1985, by the way. This is long time ago. Knives and 2 pistols. Just lands in somebody's driveway.
I don't even where to begin with this. So the coolest part is this was directed and co-produced by Elizabeth Banks, who played Effie Trinket in The Hunger Games. She was in Pitch Perfect, the film series, Pitch Perfect 2, Charlie's Angels. Yeah. Like a very well-known actress, has done a ton of stuff. She directed and co-produced this wonderful, I don't even know where to begin to call it a movie.
Yep. Yeah, we'll have to get together and I'll go see it together somehow.
This is probably the follow-up on Build Up since Snakes on a Plane.
100%. Yeah. We can do a watch party using the online sharing stuff. We should do that.
Yeah, we should. We could live stream that. We could make that a Security Weekly thing.
I'm in. Count me in. I love that idea.
I'm in.
All right, Sam, Gus, let's make this happen. Renee. All right. Thanks so much, Tyler, Katie, and Sean for joining me today. It's lovely having all 3 of you today. Nobody's going to say anything.
Bye, Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.
Happy Antarctica Day.
And a big thanks to everybody for watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We've got a few more episodes before we wrap up the year, so keep an ear out for them, and we'll see you then.